Hey Gengar Gang, what is going on? My name is Ryan, this is the Analytic Gengar, and welcome to another video. In today's video, friends, we talk about Target's new one per person Pokemon card policy. In today's video, I want to go over some of the reactions that I've seen on places like Twitter and Instagram, as well as throughout the community, some pretty interesting tidbits that are included in the new policy and breaking that down, and going over my own experience with the policy since it was put into place on April 30th, 2021 in most Target retail locations across the United States. In addition to that, we'll go over some additional news regarding ways that the Pokemon Center and Target have implemented new policies or come up with sneaky or creative ways of combating scalpers. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. So as you can see on screen right now, here is Target's newest policy. And as you can see highlighted in yellow, effective April 30th, they are changing the policy to be 3 of the same item per guest to 1 item per guest per day, period. End of story. That's limited to MLB, NBA, Pokemon, NFL, basically all the trading cards that scalpers have been having the best of times gouging prices on over the past year and a half now. So immediately this was, to be posted up, and that, any customers that were coming in should be made aware of this new purchase limit that will go into effect April 30th. The reason April 30th is in fact a very important date is because it is a Friday, and Fridays for the past couple of weeks have been the day that Target has been selling Pokemon cards beginning at 8 a.m. in the morning. In the past, I have made the comment that this was probably the stupidest decision they could have made, and the reason that I made such a bold statement regarding that is because Friday mornings at 8 a.m. are usually the time that people are going to work, going to school, and so, most individuals probably would not have the ability to take time off from work or school in order to go make this line in order to get cards. Then it also then begs the question of, well, if cards are still selling out, who is making that line? And chances are it is folks who are flipping full time or have developed enough of a, strategy around this stuff that they are able to. If you watched my scalper video, sort of working to define what a scalper is, I mentioned that infrastructure is one of the most important things. Basically, the habits they have, the patterns they follow, and the overall skill set that they utilize in order to continually squeeze supply. And honestly, Target's policy was playing directly into their infrastructure, because of all of the different types of folks that exist in the hobby, scalpers are the only ones who can dedicate time because they treat this like a job. And so, ironically enough, I wasn't a fan of the last policy, and I'm really happy that they're at least attempting to change it. As you can see in green, following along, you'll see that they added in some additional sort of context, which I think is really important, and this kind of goes directly in line with what we were just talking about. So in addition to everything else that happened on April 30th, you're supposed to also make guests aware that they're not allowed to spend the night in line, and they're not allowed to enter a virtual line if they do so. So one of the things scalpers were doing was basically making little tent cities, sometimes the night before, sometimes the morning of, but the idea was if you get there early enough, you'll be the first person in line, you'll be the first person to see the distributor. And again, with a previous purchase limit of 3 of the same item per guest, what that means is it's not 3 items total. It means if there's 3 Shining Fates ETBs, you can get 3 Shining Fates ETBs. If there's 3 blisters, you can get 6 items. If there's 3 different things and they have enough stock, you can continue to get. The only thing was they would stop you if you grabbed 4 of any one item. So there was still a pretty significant reward if you were able to form this line. Hence why waiting outside all night wasn't the worst thing ever. And as I was just talking about, infrastructure is a key component to what a scalper does. They have the time to do this, and they will do this. And because they're willing to do this, it typically means that supply is low for other folks. This is why the average collector or hobbyist can't walk into a Target right now and pick this stuff up. Instead, we have to go on places like Facebook, Mercari, and buy this stuff at a markup. So Target is kind of directly clapping back at them by saying, you know, if we catch you outside, and by the way, Target employees are usually in the store by well earlier than 2 hours before opening, usually setting up, there's a pretty significant chance that they will spot you, they will determine who you are, and then they will simply either ask you to leave or they will simply just ignore you whenever they do open up and begin letting people enter. They will likely probably instead just allow other folks to, you know, skip you and go ahead and just completely ignore you. So as you can see, going towards that bold statement, April 30th, before the store opens, they're supposed to print and post the attached purchase limit near the trading card section, and then they have a little FAQ. So, you know, can you come back later and purchase an additional trading card item? No, only one per person per day. Why are we not allowed to line up? Because it's a safety concern. Obviously, waiting outside of a Target retail location is probably not the safest thing to do. And then some further guidance. So inform, you know, they're telling, you know, make sure to remind them of all of this type of stuff, warn them if they are not doing so, you know, especially if it's a situation where, you know, they're trying to skulk around or something like that. And then get this, number 3, the partnership component, read that green highlighted section, determine next steps and if law enforcement engaged is required. So putting aside the grammar there for a minute, basically call the cops if necessary. Partnership not with the customer or scalper in this case, but rather partnership with the necessary law enforcement agency to get these guys off the property ASAP. No questions asked. And that is hilarious. So that is Target's new policy, and now that we have a good idea of what it is and what they're prepared to do, let's take a look at you know, some of the reactions on Twitter. By the way, did I mention I have a Twitter now? You guys should go follow it. Thanks. I'm still in the process of figuring out how to use it, so bear with me. But sooner or later, I'll start posting funny Pokemon memes over there, and who knows, maybe even some Twitter unique content that won't be over on Instagram and won't be over here on the YouTube page. Again, that assumes that I'll be able to figure out how Twitter works, but if I ever do, I promise it'll be a fun time. Either way, as you can see on Twitter, I was able to capture a few screenshots, and this guy is an absolute comic. Obviously, all names and pictures and stuff like that have been redacted, just because, you know, it's completely unnecessary to show that, but it is important to show what people are up to, like this clown who ends up posting this picture and says, still walked out of Target like a boss. Mind you, this was posted on April 23rd, 2021, but this was a situation where they were still looking for the, you know, enforcing some really strict limits. And as you can see, this guy clearly just didn't give a crap. He was able to net himself a pretty significant number of tins, and especially the tins and the Pikachu boxes, it looks like, all are well above the limit of 3 per item per day. So no matter what, you know, this just goes to show that people don't care, and people are actually willing to basically chuck the middle finger at Target and say, hey, I don't care what your policy is. I'm still walking out of here with what I want, not necessarily what you allow me to purchase. One person then goes ahead and replies down below in the comments how, you know, they're seeing Target employees doing some really shifty stuff. So sometimes you'll see a scalper hand a Target employee a $20 bill, and then, you know, quote unquote, my Target lets them take any and all product they want, and it's common to see them leave with similar hauls while everyone else gets sent home. So again, basically rewarding you for being outside, and then first person to the distributor is the first person to take all the product. Everyone else in line gets screwed. And then I was even able to find a completely different person who was actually complaining about another type of policy. So he says that he was at, you know, a Target in Massachusetts, and it went from 3 per SKU to 1 per SKU, meaning basically they went ahead and introduced the 1 item per person policy early, which, by the way, Target is fully allowed to do. And the security guard was quite literally just picking and choosing what we can and cannot get. Now, this character is actually really interesting because he went full up Karen, and not like the Karen I like, the other kind of Karen, and went ahead and called corporate, because you have the time to do that, which is nice, and they said he was totally in the wrong, bro. So dude said he would shut it down basically if we kept asking why. So I mean, you know, equal parts like, was it really that deep, random Twitter user to call corporate? But also at the same time, I can definitely understand how frustrating it is, because you form a line and, you know, you want X product, but instead you get Y. You know, you might have a complete set of battle styles and may not need a battle styles ETB. If you get handed that, you're simply told like, hey, here's what, you know, you're going to be allowed to buy. Versus like, if you could just point and choose the thing that you want, that would be nice. Which is kind of mirroring how things should work and how they have worked in the past. So, finally but not least, my own experiences on this, here's what I was able to get. So, you know, the story behind this really awkward random blister, which by the way had a green code card in it, so I am living the actual life, guys. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Pokemon, but if this keeps happening, I'm just not going to buy loose individual product anymore, because it's so maddening. But let me tell you the story of what happens. I end up pulling up to Target for groceries and happen to pass by the Pokemon card section. Now, mind you, over the past couple of months, I've seen nothing but desolate wasteland, so I just sincerely stopped caring. Like, for the most part, I do everything pre-order because I've come to realize that, for what it's worth, there's no sense in checking Target anymore, since either A, the scalpers beat me and there's never any product, or restocks suck and there's never any product. So as far as I care, I don't really mind to try to beat out scalpers. I work a full-time job and have better things to do with my time, so it's just really difficult. And so I just happened to be there for groceries when I swung by, and there was a Target employee walking around with a large paper tube on his back, looking awfully security guard-esque, but not really. I looked, to my surprise, at the Pokemon card section and found a series of battle styles blister packs like this one, just hanging there. So I start looking just to kind of like appreciate the fact that there's Pokemon card product on a Target store shelf. Mind you, in New York City, our stuff hasn't been really well stocked since, like, I would probably say like October of 2020, and maybe some locals will disagree with me on that, but for the most part, at least where I go, I haven't really seen much of anything. So what was funny was that, for the most part, I was impressed at the fact that there was anything there. The Target employee then proceeds to come up behind me and say, "1 item per person, sir." And I'm like, okay, thanks for whispering that in my ear. And then I kind of just stood there. I was looking at my phone, and he like circles back. He's like, "Can I help you, sir?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you can back off." And so I basically like tried ignoring him, but he kept kind of circling around. Mind you, I wasn't rude in any way, shape, or form. I kind of more said that in my head, like, why are you being so creepy? But come to find out, I guess he was just in a situation where he thought he was the cool guy who was looking over the Pokemon card section. So I ended up grabbing one singular blister, the one that's on screen right now, and he immediately grabs my arm, pulls me over to the side, and says, "I need to scan you out right now." And I'm like, I can't do self-checkout. Like, you're doing such a great job of locking down Fort Knox, I don't... So, long story short, he insists that he needs to cash me out right now. So I paid $4 in tax for this particular item. I put it in my back pocket with the receipt, and then I went around doing my groceries for the week. So, yeah. You know, aside from Target now treating things like Fort Knox, it's been a really interesting experience nonetheless. Long story short, my own 2 cents on the topic, this is about as stupid as it gets. First things first, like, the employee, I don't know if that was a local experience and that sounds like a Ryan problem. It honestly probably is, because I've heard tons of other Targets are like so chill. This wasn't my local Target, by the way. This is actually one that I was out and about, and I just so happened to stop in there because I know it very well. And so it's just kind of irritating, because it's like, not that I would ever be confrontational or like yell at the person, but it's also like, why are you walking around with a large paper tube like a bat, like you're Negan from The Walking Dead, breathing down my neck, constantly reminding me that it's 1 per person? Like, it's a $4 blister pack, and Battle Styles isn't necessarily the hottest item or commodity out there. So it's like, you need to calm down. You need to put the paper tube down, and you need to just like allow people to breathe in the trading card section, because it's really not that impressive anyway. So that was just a really odd experience for me. I was honestly just really put off by it, because you know, I've often looked forward to the time when there would be product on store shelves, and now I have to deal with this creepy guy walking behind me the entire time. So Target, if you're watching, or your customer service people who scan YouTube for complaints, or you know, looking for one, I'm one of them, because the guy was like, homeboy was straight up creepy. The next thing that I will say is that, you know, while I think this like jumbles up a scalper's traditional plan, it doesn't necessarily help the cause entirely, because again, as we've seen on Twitter, people have been and will continue to ignore the rule. It just so happens that, you know, this particular Target had a very dedicated employee, but there comes a time when he goes home, or a day that he's off, and someone who's a little bit less careful is going to be there. Someone could easily walk and grab all the stuff on the shelves. Alternatively, if I was a scalper and was working in a team, I could send someone to talk to him and make a scene, and I just go to the trading card section, clear everything off the shelves, walk away, go to self-checkout with it. By the way, there's nothing preventing that from happening. The UPCs are exactly the same. There's nothing special about them. There's no like authorization code needed by like an employee. You can literally scan the stuff at self-checkout anyway. So at the end of the day, while Target thinks they're implementing this great new rule, I personally believe that it's only making it more convoluted for regular customers. And honestly, if you're a scalper, it's probably not going to be the hardest thing in the world in order to get around some of the measures they put in place, because let's be real, as creepy as homeboy was, and I didn't really vibe with it, I do have to say, you know, he's just a human being at the end of the day. He's certainly not like, you know, a security guard at Fort Knox or anything like that. And so he can be easily bamboozled. Like I said, he'll get tired one day and just not be around the card section as much. And so it's not going to be the most impossible thing in the world to think that someone's going to get around the measures they've put into place. So that's my own 2 cents on the topic. And then just to briefly show you some of the news that has gone on. As you can see, Target has been told to call cops. So this is something that was published literally Saturday night of this weekend. And yeah, that basically falls in line with what we saw in the store policy, partnering with, you know, law enforcement in order to let them know. And there you go, right there. That's actually the quote that we just read. Determine next steps and if law enforcement engagement is required. So, you know, that means call the cops if people are not listening to you or choose to enter the store anyway with the intention of purchasing trading cards. Obviously, you know, it has been kind of big news in certain spectrums because, you know, for the most part, to think that everything needs to be as like crazy as this is unfortunate, but it is true. So it's just one of those situations where, you know, unfortunately, it is becoming more and more widely known, which is kind of embarrassing in my opinion. I never thought the Pokemon trading card game community would come to this, but you know, obviously news like this doesn't necessarily always reflect the greatest on us, because unfortunately folks outside the hobby may be looking in and saying, oh geez, what's going on in that hobby? But you know, one of the most important things is that for a fact, this is primarily driven by scalpers and by people who are just being greedy and unreasonable with how much they'd like to take. And finally but not least, a little bit of like other random news is the Pokemon Center has come up with another creative way of pushing back against scalpers. In this particular case, they're allowing people to line up, and similar to Target, they're not a fan of the whole lining up thing. So they ended up telling people, hey, told fans you should not be lining up early for the event. You know, but of course, the scalpers don't listen. So the only difference is that, unlike Target, which has just been told, tell them to leave, and if they don't leave, call the cops, the Pokemon Center is giving away time tickets. So instead of entering the virtual line, they're approaching it similar to Target, where if you line up early, you won't be allowed to jump into line early. And so the idea then becomes, it's very simple. We're going to hand out tickets from the back of the line. So effectively, if you show up right on time, you should be able to scoop a ticket up and then get in there. The scalper who was in front of you but showed up at 4 a.m. in the morning won't get a ticket. So that's the idea. Does it work? I mean, to be determined. This article particularly provides a lot of favorable coverage of the action. I just think that all this means is that what if a scalper shows up behind you? Now you look like the scalper. Here's the problem, is that scalpers don't wear t-shirts that say, hey, I buy, sell, and flip Pokemon cards for a living and live in mom's basement. You know, that's not how this works. A scalper could look like you, could look like me, could look like any one of us. And that is the problem, is that I could form a line right on time at 8:01 a.m., but the scalper who's just a little bit smarter comes in right after me, and he probably gets the ticket before I do. That's the funny part. I personally believe that the only way this problem truly gets solved is a inundation of product in the market, because all of these unnecessary steps are really just creating an additional artificial bottleneck that is, you know, slowly squeezing supply. And so what ends up happening is it gives off a false sense of scarcity. Realistically, I know for a fact Pokemon is printing more and more product every single day. So I think Pokemon basically just needs to drive the proverbial car out of the ditch. For those of you who drive or have seen any movies where it happens, a car goes into a ditch and gets stuck, and if you lightly tap on the gas pedal, you might not move the car because the car won't be able to overcome all of the different forces holding it into place. You want to know the best way? Romp on the gas pedal, and the car will generate so much force that it pushes itself out of the ditch, and then, you know, you can infinitely increase your pressure on the gas pedal. I think that's what Pokemon needs to do. They need to absolutely depress the gas pedal, go ahead and print and flood the market, and then at a certain point, you know, there'll be too much of it, but that's okay. That's perfectly fine. In fact, it kind of lines up because right now there's tons of demand, and more importantly, sets like Chilling Reign are going to be very highly demanded. And so I have a feeling that the more you print, the more people will buy. But the intention is that by flooding the market, you should hopefully see a situation play out where distributors lower their prices and stuff starts sticking on store shelves, not because people are disinterested, but because there's so much out there that it's genuinely back to the way things were or closely approximates that. But with that said, friends, thanks again for checking out another video. As I always say, you could have been anywhere on the internet, but you chose to spend some time with me, and that means the world. As always, if you aren't already, feel free to join the Gengar Gang. This past weekend, I believe we crossed the 950 subscriber threshold, which means we are slowly but surely getting up to our 1,000 subscriber mark. Obviously, a lot of big things happen to YouTube channels once they hit 1,000 subscribers, including monetization, as well as the community tab. And frankly, I'm excited equally for both, but definitely for the community tab because it means another avenue through which to engage with my viewership, which is awesome. Speaking of viewership, thank you as always for checking out another video. Leave any comments down below and let me know what you think of the new target policy. Obviously, I'm not the biggest fan, but hey, perhaps some of you have had better experiences and I would love to hear more about those. Other than that, friends, as always, appreciate the viewership, appreciate the time. Thank you for checking out another video, and we will talk soon. Peace.